My name is Garrett, and at 32, I thought I had built a decent life as a software developer. Nothing fancy, just comfortable. What I never expected was how one family dinner would tear open wounds I had spent years trying to heal. My dad always favored my sister Mia, but this time he crossed a line that changed everything. When I refused to pay for her new car, I walked away for good. 3 days later, the bank called. Let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to make the painful choice to protect yourself from family. Growing up in our suburban Chicago home, I always felt like an afterthought. From my earliest memories, there was a clear hierarchy in our household. My father Marcus at the top, followed closely by my younger sister Mia, then my mother Diana, and finally me. I was the forgotten son, the one expected to understand, to give, and to never complain. Mia arrived when I was 4, and from that moment the family dynamic shifted permanently. I still remember the day my father came home with a pink bicycle for 6-year-old Mia, while telling me that at 10 I was old enough to save my allowance for my own. This pattern repeated throughout our childhood. Mia received new clothes for school while I got hand-me-downs. She joined expensive gymnastics classes, while I was told that the free community basketball program should be enough. Your sister needs more support, my father would explain whenever I questioned the disparity. Boys are naturally more independent. This was his standard justification, delivered with a finality that discouraged further discussion. My mother Diana was a kindergarten teacher who lived in fear of conflict. Whenever I approached her privately about the unfairness, she would stroke my hair and whisper, "Just keep the peace, Garrett. Your father means well." Her eyes would dart nervously toward the door, as if he might overhear our conversation from another room. Over time, I realized she was trapped in her own way, unable or unwilling to challenge the family structure my father had established. The financial inequity became most apparent when college approached. Despite maintaining a 3.9 GPA and gaining acceptance to several good schools, I received no financial support from my parents. "We need to save for Mia's future," my father announced at dinner the night I received my acceptance letter to Northwestern. "You can take out loans or go to community college first. You are smart enough to figure it out." I worked 2 jobs while attending the state university, graduating with a computer science degree and $30,000 in student debt. Meanwhile, Mia attended a private college with full parental support, studying communications and changing her major 3 times before graduating 5 years later. After college, I moved into a tiny studio apartment and took an entry-level programming job. I lived frugally, brought lunch from home, and slowly climbed the career ladder while paying down my debt. Social invitations from my family became increasingly rare, except when they needed technical help with computers or free website work from my father's insurance business. My sister Mia bounced between jobs in marketing, never staying at one company longer than 18 months. Each departure was always someone else's fault. Her boss was jealous of her ideas. Her coworkers were too competitive. The company didn't recognize her talents. After each job loss, my father would increase his criticism of my career choices, suggesting that I should use my connections to help Mia find better opportunities. "Family first, Garrett," he would say, a phrase that only seemed to apply when they needed something from me. By the time I turned 30, I had established a comfortable life. I had been promoted to senior developer at a healthcare software company, paid off my student loans, and moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood. I started dating Rachel, a pediatric nurse with a practical outlook and warm laugh that made everything better. For the first time, I felt like my life was truly my own. Contact with my family had dwindled to holiday gatherings and occasional phone calls from my mother, which usually ended with requests to help Mia with something or attend some family function where I would inevitably be cornered about my responsibilities. I developed a polite but distant relationship with them, a delicate balance of minimal contact without complete estrangement. Last Thanksgiving, something unexpected happened. My father actually asked about my job and seemed genuinely interested in my recent promotion. My mother hugged me twice and showed me old photo albums. Even Mia asked about Rachel instead of talking exclusively about herself. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps age had softened my father, that our relationship might evolve into something healthier. That tiny spark of hope made the invitation to Sunday dinner seem like a potential turning point rather than the trap it would prove to be. The call came on a Wednesday evening as Rachel and I were making stir-fry in my apartment. I almost let it go to voicemail when I saw Mom on the caller ID, but something made me answer. "Garrett, honey," my mother said, her voice unusually bright. "Your father and I were hoping you could come for dinner this Sunday. Nothing fancy, just family time. It has been too long." The invitation caught me off guard. Outside of major holidays dinner, invitations from my parents were rare unless they needed something. Still, I remembered that moment of connection at Thanksgiving. "Is there a special occasion?" I asked cautiously. "Does family need an occasion to gather?" she replied, a slight defensive edge creeping into her tone. "Your father specifically asked me to call you. He wants to see you." Those last 5 words triggered a long, dormant desire for paternal approval that I thought I had outgrown. I agreed before fully considering the implications. After hanging up, Rachel noticed my expression. "Family stuff," she asked, expertly flipping vegetables in the wok. "Dinner invitation for Sunday." "It is weird. They never invite me unless they want something." Rachel had heard enough stories about my family to understand my hesitation. We had been dating for 8 months. And while she had met them briefly at Christmas, she had witnessed enough of their dynamic to grasp the complexity of those relationships. "Maybe they are actually trying to connect," she suggested, her natural optimism showing through. "People can change, especially as they get older. My dad was super strict until his heart scare 3 years ago. Now he cries at dog food commercials." I smiled at the image but remained skeptical. My dad is different. He has never admitted being wrong about anything in his entire life. "You do not have to go," Rachel said, serving the stir-fry onto plates. "But if you do, just remember you can leave any time. You are not that financially strapped kid anymore. You have choices." That night I lay awake, considering my options. Part of me wanted to believe this invitation represented a genuine attempt at reconciliation. Another part, hardened by experience, suspected an ulterior motive. In the end, hope won out over caution. I texted my mother to confirm I would be there at 5. The days before Sunday passed quickly. I even stopped by a local bakery to pick up a chocolate cake, my mother's favorite, as a gesture of goodwill. Rachel offered to come along for moral support, but I declined. If this went badly, I preferred to face it alone. Sunday arrived with perfect spring weather, making the 30-minute drive to my childhood home almost pleasant. The familiar 2-story colonial looked smaller than I remembered, its blue paint fading slightly around the edges. The front garden, once my mother's pride, appeared freshly mulched and planted with new flowers. My father answered the door before I could knock. Marcus Reynolds had always been an imposing figure, tall with broad shoulders and a permanent furrow between his eyebrows. At 64, his hair had gone completely gray, but he stood as straight as ever. "Garrett," he said, extending his hand. "Good to see you, son." Son. A word he rarely used with me. I shifted the cake box to shake his hand, noting the unusual warmth in his grip. "Thanks for inviting me," I replied, stepping into the foyer that smelled of lemon polish and roasting chicken. My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She seemed smaller, more fragile than at Thanksgiving, but her smile was genuine as she hugged me. "You brought dessert," she exclaimed, taking the box. "So thoughtful. Come in, come in. Everything is almost ready." The living room had been redecorated since my last visit, the old floral sofa replaced with a sleek gray sectional. Family photos lined the mantel, and I noticed with surprise that several featured me, including a recent one from my company website, that I had not provided them. My father gestured for me to sit, and even more surprisingly asked if I wanted a beer. As he handed me the bottle, he actually asked about my work project and listened to my answer without interrupting or changing the subject. The conversation flowed with an ease I could not remember experiencing in this house. Just as my mother announced that appetizers were ready, the front door burst open. Mia swept in like a small hurricane, designer sunglasses pushed up into her blonde hair, phone in hand. "Sorry I am late," she announced to no one in particular. Traffic was absolute murder. Mia had always known how to make an entrance. At 28, she still carried herself with the confidence of the pretty girl who had been told she was special her entire life. She air-kissed my mother, hugged my father, and gave me a quick wave before dropping her purse on the coffee table. "Garrett, you look different," she said, examining me as if I were a slightly altered piece of furniture. "New glasses." "Same glasses, new haircut," I replied, touching my recently trimmed sides self-consciously. "Huh. Anyway, Mom, the place looks amazing. Very Pottery Barn meets West Elm." We moved to the dining room where my mother had prepared an elaborate spread of appetizers. As we settled around the table, I noticed small changes in everyone's behavior. My father kept refilling my beer without being asked. My mother repeatedly mentioned how successful my company was becoming. Mia actually asked about Rachel, though she referred to her as your nurse girlfriend rather than using her name. The warning bells started ringing faintly in my mind when my father asked about my recent promotion and salary increase information I had not shared with them. When Mia casually mentioned her recent job transition and how difficult the job market had become, the bells grew louder. By the time my mother served the roast chicken, I was mentally preparing myself for whatever request was coming. Still, I played along answering questions and even sharing a few stories about work. For a brief moment, it almost felt like the family dinner I had always wanted as a child. That moment ended as soon as my father cleared his throat during the main course. "So, Garrett," my father began setting down his fork with deliberate precision, "your mother and I have been thinking about how well you are doing these days. That promotion, the bonus you mentioned at Christmas. It must feel good to have that kind of financial security." I nodded cautiously, not remembering any bonus discussion at Christmas, but recognizing the familiar pattern beginning to unfold. "Mia has had some challenges lately," he continued, glancing at my sister, who immediately adopted a solemn expression. "Her company downsized, and she was unfortunately caught in the reduction. 3 weeks ago, Mia added pushing her food around her plate, after I brought in that huge client too. So unfair." My father reached over to pat her hand sympathetically. "These things happen to the best of us. The important thing is that family sticks together during tough times." The phrase hung in the air like a storm cloud. I took a sip of water, waiting for what I now knew was coming. "The timing is particularly difficult because Mia's car is giving her problems," my father continued. "The transmission is shot, and the mechanic says repairs would cost more than the car is worth." "It is a nightmare," Mia interjected. "I cannot even drive to interviews properly. I had to Uber to one last week and the driver got lost. Totally bombed the interview because I was stressed." My mother nodded vigorously. "Such bad luck, darling. But your father has a solution." Marcus Reynolds straightened in his chair, assuming the authoritative posture I remembered from childhood family meetings. "Mia needs reliable transportation to get back on her feet. We have been looking at some reasonable options, and there is a nice Audi A4 at Peterson's dealership. Nothing too fancy, just practical and safe." The room went silent as all eyes turned to me. My stomach tightened as memories flooded back. My 10th birthday, when the promised bike never materialized because Mia needed braces. High school graduation, when my party was canceled because Mia had a dance recital the same weekend. College tuition that went to Mia's private university while I worked night shifts at a convenience store. "The car is $25,000, my father stated matter-of-factly. "With your recent financial situation, we thought you might want to help your sister through this rough patch." There it was. Not a request, but an expectation. Not "would you consider," but "we thought you might want to," as if only a monster would decline. Classic Marcus Reynolds manipulation. "You have all that extra money just sitting in your accounts," Mia added, as if she had intimate knowledge of my finances, "and I would totally pay you back someday." The casual entitlement in her voice made something shift inside me. I glanced around the table, taking in my father's expectant expression, my mother's nervous smile, and Mia's practiced look of distress. For the first time, I saw with perfect clarity the roles we had all been playing my entire life. "How do you know what is in my accounts?" I asked quietly. My father waved dismissively. "Figure of speech. We just mean that with your salary and minimal expenses, you must have savings. No mortgage, no children to support." "I am saving for a house," I replied. "And I do have expenses. Student loans that I just finished paying off, retirement contributions, regular bills." "But nothing important," Mia countered. not like a car that determines whether someone can work or not. My mother reached across the table to touch my arm. "Sweetie, we are not asking for a handout for Mia. Just family helping family. You remember how your father helped Cousin Brian with his business loan?" I did remember. Cousin Brian was my father's sister's son, who had received a $5,000 loan and repaid it within 6 months. This was 5 times that amount for a luxury car, not a business investment. "Why an Audi?" I asked. "There are reliable cars for half that price." My father's expression hardened slightly. Mia needs to maintain a certain image for the types of jobs she is applying for in marketing. Appearance matters in her field. "My old Honda got me to work just fine during my entire career progression," I pointed out. "That is different," my father said dismissively. "Your industry does not care about image. Programmers can wear hoodies to work." I sat back in my chair, the familiar feeling of being diminished washing over me. But this time, instead of accepting it, I felt a strange, calm clarity. "I am sorry about your job situation, Mia," I said carefully, "but I cannot pay for a $25,000 car." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. My father's face flushed red as he set down his napkin with deliberate slowness. "Cannot or will not?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Both," I replied, maintaining eye contact. "I do not have that kind of disposable income, and even if I did, I do not think buying an Audi would be the best way to help Mia." Mia's eyes narrowed. "Wow. Just wow. After everything this family has done for you." I almost laughed at the absurdity of her statement. "What exactly has this family done for me, Mia? I put myself through college. I paid off my own student loans. I built my career without connections or help." My father's hands formed fists on the table. "We gave you a home, food, clothing. We raised you, and this is the gratitude we get. Your sister needs help, and you are too selfish to provide it." The word, selfish, hit like a physical blow. How many times had I heard that throughout my childhood whenever I asked for equal treatment? I would be happy to help Mia update her resume or make industry connections, I offered. I could even loan her a few hundred for car repairs until she finds another job. My father stood up, towering over the table. "It is just a little help, Garrett. Your sister needs a car, not career advice from someone who stares at computer screens all day. I cannot believe how selfish you have become." And there it was. The real purpose of the lovely dinner, the sudden interest in my life, the family photos on the mantel, all a setup for this moment, this request, this expected compliance. "No," I said, simply surprising even myself with the steadiness of my voice. "I will not buy Mia an Audi. It is just a little help." "You are selfish," my father shouted, slamming his palm on the dining table hard enough to make the dishes jump. "After everything we have done for you, this is how you repay us, by turning your back on family." His face had transformed from the warm, welcoming expression of earlier to something I recognized from childhood confrontations, a mask of righteous anger that tolerated no defiance. His eyes bulged slightly, and a vein pulsed visibly at his temple. "Dad, please calm down," I said, keeping my voice level despite the adrenaline rushing through my system. "This is not about turning my back on anyone. It is about reasonable expectations." "Reasonable." He spat the word like it tasted foul. "What is unreasonable about helping your sister when she is down? When I was your age, I would have done anything to help my siblings." Mia, sensing her moment, pushed her chair back dramatically and began to cry, perfectly timed tears that left her makeup intact. "I cannot believe you would let me struggle like this, Garrett. Do you know how humiliating it is to ask your little brother for help? I would do it for you in a heartbeat." The absurdity of her statement almost made me laugh. Mia had never done anything for me that did not ultimately benefit her in some way. The one time I had asked to borrow $500 during a tight month in my first year after college, she had lectured me about financial responsibility before declining. "You have never helped me with anything, Mia," I stated calmly, "and I doubt you would buy me a luxury car if our situations were reversed." "How dare you speak to your sister that way?" my father roared, pointing his finger inches from my face. She has been nothing but supportive of you her entire life." My mother finally intervened, her hands fluttering nervously like small birds. "Please, everyone, let us just take a breath. Garrett, honey, I know 25,000 sounds like a lot, but your sister really does need reliable transportation. Maybe you could contribute part of the amount." Her attempt at compromise only underscored how distorted their perception was. Even my mother, who occasionally acknowledged the favoritism in private, was fully committed to the idea that my financial resources should be available to the family, specifically to Mia, without question. "Mom, I have worked hard for everything I have," I explained, trying to keep frustration from my voice. "I lived in a terrible apartment eating ramen for years to pay off my student loans. I saved carefully. I cannot just hand over my savings for a luxury car." "There it is," my father sneered. Me. All you think about is yourself. Your sister would give you the shirt off her back, but you cannot spare anything from your precious savings." Mia nodded vigorously, wiping away tears. "Remember when you needed that graphing calculator for advanced placement calculus, and I let you borrow mine for a whole semester?" I stared at her in disbelief. "That was Dad's calculator that he bought for you, and you never took calculus. You let me use it because you had no use for it, and you complained about it constantly." "See how he twists everything?" Mia turned to our parents. "Nothing is ever good enough for him." My father's face darkened further. "I always knew you resented your sister's success. Just because she has a more outgoing personality and made friends more easily, you have held this grudge all these years." The conversation had fully derailed into familiar territory. No matter what the actual issue was, it would always be reframed as my jealousy of Mia, my selfishness, my failure to appreciate all they had supposedly done for me. "This is not about resentment," I insisted. "This is about reasonable boundaries. I would help Mia find a used car in her budget. I would help her with her resume. But I will not buy her an Audi because she thinks she deserves it." "You ungrateful little—" my father started, then caught himself visibly struggling for control. He took a deep breath and shifted tactics, his voice becoming dangerously quiet. "Let me make this very clear, Garrett. This family has always operated on a simple principle: we support each other. If you cannot understand that fundamental concept, then perhaps you do not understand what it means to be part of this family." The threat hung in the air, unmistakable in its implication. I had heard versions of it before, usually followed by days or weeks of cold shoulders, pointed exclusion from family events, and passive-aggressive comments. "Are you threatening to disown me if I do not buy Mia a car?" I asked, wanting absolute clarity. My father's jaw worked silently for a moment. "I am saying that family means sacrifice. If you cannot make sacrifices for your sister, then you have chosen your path." My mother gasped. "Marcus, surely that is going too far." He silenced her with a look. "Diana, our son needs to understand that actions have consequences. He cannot reject his family obligations and expect everything to continue as normal." I looked at each of their faces in turn. My father righteous and immovable. My mother conflicted, but ultimately compliant. Mia, a perfect mixture of victimhood and entitlement. And in that moment, with perfect clarity, I realized that nothing would ever change. This dynamic was carved in stone, roles assigned at birth, that we would play until death, unless someone broke the cycle. "I understand perfectly," I said, folding my napkin and placing it beside my plate as I stood. "I understand that in this family, love has always been conditional. I understand that my role has always been to give, while Mia's has been to take. I understand that no matter what I achieve or how hard I work, it will never be enough to earn the respect you give her automatically." "Now you are being dramatic," my father scoffed. "Typical victim mentality." "I am not a victim," I replied, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. "Not anymore. Because I am making a choice right now. I choose not to participate in this dynamic anymore. I choose not to be manipulated or guilted. I choose to walk away." "You cannot be serious," Mia exclaimed. "You would throw away your family over money." I looked at her directly. "This has never been about money, Mia. This is about respect, about recognizing that I am a person with my own life and choices, not a resource to be tapped whenever convenient." My father stood as well, his height, allowing him to look down at me physically, as he had always done emotionally. If you walk out that door right now, do not expect to be welcomed back until you make this right. For a moment I felt that familiar childhood fear, the desperate need for paternal approval that had shaped so many of my choices. But behind it came something stronger. The voice of the adult I had become, the man who had built a life on his own terms. "Goodbye, Dad," I said simply. "Mom, Mia." I walked out of the dining room, through the living room, with its carefully arranged photos, and out the front door without looking back. The spring air felt clean and fresh, compared to the stifling atmosphere inside. My hands shook slightly as I unlocked my car door, but my mind was surprisingly clear. As I drove away from my childhood home, I called Rachel. "It went exactly as you predicted," I told her when she answered. "They wanted me to buy Mia an Audi." "Are you okay?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "Honestly, I think I am better than okay," I replied, realizing it was true. "I think I just set myself free." The first day after walking out of my parents' house passed in a strange blur. I went to work, attended meetings, and wrote code as usual, but everything felt slightly surreal, as if I were watching myself go through the motions from a distance. Rachel stayed over that night, her presence a silent comfort as we ate takeout and watched mindless television. By the second day, the text messages started. Mia sent a series of increasingly dramatic accusations ranging from, "I cannot believe you would destroy our family over money," to, "You have always been jealous of me, and now everyone can see it." My mother sent gentler but equally manipulative messages. "Your father is just upset, he did not mean what he said, and please reconsider. Garrett family is all we have in the end." My father maintained radio silence, his absence more threatening than any message he could have sent. I knew from experience that he was waiting for me to break first, to come crawling back with an apology, and more importantly, my credit card. "You should block their numbers for a while," Rachel suggested, as I stared at my phone during dinner on the second night. "Give yourself some space to process." She was right as usual. I blocked both Mia and my mother's numbers, feeling a mixture of guilt and relief as I did so. That night I slept more soundly than I had in years, as if some unconscious tension had finally released its grip on my body. On the third day after the dinner, I was in a budget meeting at work when my phone vibrated with an unknown number. I ignored it, but when the same number called again immediately, a sense of unease prompted me to excuse myself from the conference room. "Hello, is this Garrett Reynolds?" a professional female voice asked when I answered. "Yes, speaking. This is Sarah Daniels from First National Bank's Security Department. I am calling because we have detected some unusual activity on your accounts that we want to verify with you." My heart rate accelerated instantly. "What kind of activity?" "There were several attempted login failures on your online banking yesterday evening, followed by an attempted wire transfer this morning that was flagged by our security system. The transfer was attempted using your old address as verification, but it did not match your current information in our system." I leaned against the wall, processing this information. "How much was the attempted transfer formation?" $26,500, she replied. "The destination account belongs to Peterson Auto Group. Are you in the process of purchasing a vehicle, Mr. Reynolds?" The amount was the price of Mia's Audi plus tax. A cold realization washed over me. "No, I am not buying a car," I said firmly. "This was definitely not authorized by me." "I suspected as much," Sarah said. "Fortunately, our security protocols prevented the transfer from processing. The person attempting the transaction could not answer all the security questions correctly, particularly the new ones you set up when you changed your address last year." I thanked her for the vigilance and agreed to come to the bank after work to file a formal report and change all my security information. As I hung up, another realization struck me. My father knew my social security number. He had access to my birth certificate and other identifying information. He had been my emergency contact on forms for years, and until I moved last year, I had lived at the same address since college, an address they all knew. This was not an impulsive act of anger. This was premeditated identity theft. I called Rachel immediately. "You are not going to believe this." I began, then recounted the bank's call. "Oh my God, Garrett," she gasped. "That is not just manipulative, that is criminal. Are you going to call the police?" The question stopped me short. Would I report my own father for attempting to steal from me? The conditioned part of me that still sought his approval recoiled at the thought. But the part of me that had walked out of that dinner knew this was a line that could not be uncrossed. "I think I have to," I said finally. "This goes beyond family drama." At the bank that afternoon, I sat across from Sarah Daniels and a bank security officer named Michael, who took detailed notes as I explained the situation. Their faces remained professionally neutral, but I caught a flash of sympathy in Sarah's eyes when I mentioned it was likely my father who had attempted the transfer. "Unfortunately, this type of situation is not as uncommon as people might think," Michael said gently. "Family members sometimes believe they have rights to access finances that they legally do not. We recommend filing a police report for documentation purposes, even if you ultimately decide not to press charges." I nodded, feeling simultaneously numb and hyper-aware. "Do you have records of who attempted to access the account IP addresses or anything?" "We do have that information, but we can only release it to law enforcement as part of an official investigation," Sarah explained. "If you decide to file a police report, they can request those records." After completely overhauling my security settings and adding additional verification steps to my accounts, I drove to the local police station. The process of filing a report was surprisingly straightforward, the officer taking my statement without judgment as I explained the family context and the attempted theft. "Would you like to press charges if we can verify the identity of the person who attempted to access your accounts?" the officer asked, his pen poised above the form. The question hung in the air between us. To press charges against my own father would be to burn a bridge permanently, to declare publicly that he was not just a difficult parent, but a criminal who had attempted to steal from his own son. "I need to think about that," I replied honestly, "but I want the report on file." That evening, as Rachel and I sat on my couch discussing the day's events, memories began surfacing from my childhood and teen years. Times when money had mysteriously disappeared from my drawer, the summer job paycheck that I could not find after leaving it on my desk, the graduation money from my grandparents that was supposedly put into a college fund that never materialized. "I think this might not be the first time," I said quietly. "I think he might have been taking money from me for years." Rachel took my hand. "That would explain why he thought he had the right to your accounts now. In his mind, your money has always been family money, meaning his to control." As we talked, my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. Warily, I answered to hear the voice of my Aunt Susan, my mother's sister who lived in Minnesota. "Garrett, thank goodness you picked up," she said, her voice tense. "Your mother called me crying today. What is going on with your father and sister?" I had always liked Aunt Susan, who seemed to see through my father's manipulations more clearly than my mother ever could. Briefly, I explained the car demand, the ultimatum, and now the attempted bank fraud, half expecting her to defend her sister's family. Instead, she sighed heavily. "I was afraid something like this would happen eventually. Your father has been in financial trouble for years. He remortgaged the house twice without telling your mother. Mia's college loans are all in his name, and she has never made a payment. He has been borrowing from family members with increasingly desperate stories." This new information rearranged the puzzle pieces in my mind. So this was never really about Mia needing a car, was it? "I doubt it," Aunt Susan replied. "My guess is they are underwater on multiple debts, and your sister's job loss was the final straw. They probably saw your savings as the easiest solution." After ending the call with a promise to keep in touch, I sat in stunned silence. The entire family dynamic that had shaped my life was built on even more lies than I had realized. My father's constant demands that I help Mia were not just about favoritism, but about his own financial mismanagement. "What are you thinking?" Rachel asked softly. "I am thinking that I need to talk to a lawyer," I replied. "And then I need to have a very difficult conversation with my mother." Following Aunt Susan's revelations, I took a personal day from work and met with a lawyer who specialized in identity theft and family law. Melissa Kang listened attentively as I outlined the situation, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. "Based on what you have told me, you have several options," she explained when I finished. First, you can pursue criminal charges for the attempted bank fraud. Second, you can send a formal cease and desist letter regarding any future attempts to access your finances. Third, you can seek a restraining order if you feel your father might escalate the situation. The gravity of these options weighed heavily on me. I never imagined I would be discussing legal protection for my own parents, I admitted. Melissa's expression softened slightly. Family financial exploitation is unfortunately common, especially when there are long-standing patterns of control and entitlement. Taking legal steps is not about punishment. It is about establishing clear boundaries. After considering my options, I decided to start with a formal letter from the lawyer to my parents, outlining the legal implications of the attempted bank fraud and making it clear that any further attempts would result in criminal charges. I also requested that Melissa draft a separate letter to my mother alone, offering to meet with her in a neutral location without my father present. The certified letters were sent the following day. Within hours, my phone exploded with calls from numbers I did not recognize. Voice messages revealed they were from various family members, including my father's brother, my grandmother, and several cousins. All expressed shock at the misunderstanding and urged me to talk to my father directly rather than involving lawyers. I ignored them all until I received a text from an unknown number that turned out to be my Aunt Susan. "Your mother wants to meet. She is afraid to use her phone. Can I give her your number?" 2 days later, I sat in a quiet corner of a cafe 10 miles from my parents' house, watching my mother approach the table. Diana Reynolds looked smaller than I remembered, her shoulders hunched as if carrying a physical weight. The dark circles under her eyes suggested she had not been sleeping well. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as she sat down, her voice barely above a whisper. I did not know where else to turn. "I am glad you reached out, Mom," I replied, keeping my tone gentle but firm. "But I need complete honesty from you now." She nodded, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "Your father does not know I am here. He would be furious." The waitress brought the tea I had ordered for my mother, giving her something to occupy her trembling hands. After she took a sip, my mother began to speak. "It started about 10 years ago. Your father made some investments that did not work out. He never told me the details, just that we needed to be careful with money for a while. Then Mia started college, and the expenses were more than we expected." She paused, gathering courage. "Instead of adjusting our lifestyle, your father started borrowing money. Credit cards, home equity loans, personal loans from friends. He always said it was temporary, that a big commission was coming, that his investments would turn around." Tears welled in her eyes. "When Mia graduated, we were already in trouble. Your father insisted she needed to live in a nice apartment, in a good area, to make the right connections. He co-signed her lease, paid for furniture, bought her first car. Every time I questioned the expense, he would get angry, accuse me of not wanting our daughter to succeed." The story continued, painting a picture of escalating financial desperation, hidden behind a facade of middle-class stability. My father had apparently been juggling debts for years, taking from one source to pay another. Mia's recent job loss had pushed an already precarious situation to the breaking point. "The car was not really for Mia," my mother admitted. "Your father needed the money to make a mortgage payment. The house is in foreclosure, Garrett. We have 30 days to come up with the money." I sat back processing this information, and he thought identity theft was the solution, stealing from his own son. My mother flinched at the words. "He does not see it that way. In his mind, family resources are communal. He genuinely believes that your success means you have an obligation to help, especially when it comes to Mia." "And what do you believe, Mom?" I asked quietly. She looked up, real pain in her eyes. "I believe I failed you. I allowed your father to favor Mia. I stayed silent when I should have spoken up. I convinced myself it was easier to keep the peace than to fight for fairness." Her honesty was unexpected and disarming. For the first time, I saw my mother not as a passive enabler, but as another victim of my father's controlling nature, albeit one who had made choices that hurt me deeply. "What are you going to do now?" I asked. "I do not know," she admitted. "Your father refuses to acknowledge how bad things are. He keeps saying another opportunity is just around the corner. Mia still thinks the bank issue was just a miscommunication, that you overreacted." I took a deep breath. Mom, I need to ask you something important. Did Dad ever take money from me when I was younger? Allowance money, graduation gifts? Anything like that? Her face crumpled, confirming my suspicions before she even spoke. He called it borrowing. He always said he would replace it. The biggest was your grandparents' college fund money. $5,000 they had saved for you. He said it was just temporary, but then Mia needed braces, and she trailed off, unable to complete the justification. The confirmation of this long suspected betrayal should have angered me, but instead I felt an odd sense of closure. My memories were not faulty. The gaslighting about missing money had been real. I filed a police report about the bank incident, I told her gently. I have not decided whether to press charges, but there will be an investigation. My mother nodded resignation in her posture. I understand. I would not blame you if you did. What about you? I asked. Are you safe with him? Financially? Emotionally? I have been with Marcus for 36 years, she said, a faint smile crossing her face. But last week I opened my own bank account for the first time since we got married. Aunt Susan helped me. I have been putting aside a little money from my teaching job. Not much, but something that is just mine. This small act of independence seemed significant, a first step toward possible change. As we continued talking, my mother revealed more details about my father's financial manipulations and Mia's willing participation in the family dynamic. By the time we said goodbye 2 hours later, I had a much clearer picture of the situation I had walked away from. The police investigation proceeded with methodical slowness. Digital records confirmed that the attempted bank access had come from an IP address registered to my parents' home internet service. When confronted with this evidence, my father initially denied everything, then claimed he had been trying to move money as a surprise gift for me. The detective saw through this transparent lie, and formal charges were filed: identity theft and attempted bank fraud. My father hired an expensive lawyer who immediately sought a plea deal, hoping to keep him out of prison given his age and lack of prior criminal record. Throughout this process, my mother continued to meet with me, secretly torn between loyalty to her husband and her growing recognition of how toxic the family dynamic had become. Mia vacillated between angry accusations and tearful pleas for reconciliation, always with an undertone of financial need. The most difficult decision came when the prosecutor asked if I would support a plea agreement that included probation, financial restitution, and mandatory counseling, rather than jail time for my father. He is still your father, Rachel observed as we discussed it one evening, but that does not mean you owe him anything, especially not protection from the consequences of his actions. After much soul-searching, I agreed to the plea deal with one additional condition: my father would have no contact with me for at least 1 year. The prosecutor incorporated this into the agreement, and my father, facing the reality of potential imprisonment, finally accepted. The news of Marcus Reynolds' legal troubles spread quickly through our extended family and social circles. Some relatives cut contact with me, convinced I had betrayed family loyalty by involving the law. Others, who had apparently been victims of my father's financial manipulations themselves, reached out with stories that confirmed I had made the right decision. My mother, in a move that surprised everyone, including herself, filed for legal separation. Not divorce yet, she explained during one of our now regular coffee meetings. But I need to protect myself financially while your father is on probation. As for Mia, the family crisis forced her to confront realities she had long avoided. Without our father's financial support, she took a job at a retail store, a position she would have considered beneath her just months earlier. Our relationship remained strained, but occasional text exchanges suggested she might be capable of growth when not under our father's influence. 6 months after that fateful Sunday dinner, my life had transformed in ways I never could have anticipated. The boundaries I had established, though painful, had created space for genuine healing to begin. 1 year after walking away from my family dinner, I stood in the kitchen of my new house, arranging cheese and crackers on a serving plate. The modest 3-bedroom home was nothing extravagant, but with its small backyard and sunny kitchen, it represented everything I had worked for: security, independence, and a future built on my own terms. "Need any help?" Rachel asked, entering the kitchen with an empty wine glass. The diamond ring on her left hand caught the light still new enough that we both found ourselves glancing at it frequently. "Just finishing up," I replied, leaning over to kiss her cheek. "The first guests should be here soon." We were hosting a housewarming party, a small gathering of friends and selected family members who had supported us through the turbulent events of the past year. The guest list had been carefully considered a reflection of the boundaries I had learned to establish and maintain. The doorbell rang, and Rachel went to answer it, while I added a final touch to the appetizer arrangement. I heard my mother's voice in the entryway, followed by Aunt Susan's laugh. Their relationship had strengthened considerably over the past year, with Susan providing the emotional support my mother needed to maintain her separation from my father. Diana Reynolds entered the kitchen carrying a bouquet of flowers and a homemade cake. At 61, she looked younger than she had in years, the constant tension that had lined her face now notably absent. "The house is beautiful, Garrett," she said, setting down her offerings and embracing me. "I am so proud of you." Those words, so rarely heard during my childhood, still had the power to warm me from within. Our relationship had been rebuilt slowly, one honest conversation at a time. Weekly therapy sessions had helped me understand that while I could forgive my mother's past weakness, I could also hold her accountable for her choices going forward. As more guests arrived, I observed the new dynamics with a sense of gratitude. My mother chatting comfortably with Rachel's parents, co-workers mingling with friends from my community basketball league, Aunt Susan introducing her husband to our neighbors. Notably absent were my father and Mia. Marcus Reynolds was still serving his probation, the terms of which included financial counseling and community service. Our no-contact order remained in place by my choice, a boundary I was not yet ready to reconsider. Mia had sent a housewarming card with a brief note. "Congratulations on your new home. I am working on myself. Maybe someday we can talk. Mia." No request for money, no accusation of abandonment. A small step perhaps, but significant given our history. Later, as our guests enjoyed dinner in the backyard, Rachel nudged me and nodded toward my mother, who was deep in conversation with my friend Carlos from work. "She is telling him about her new apartment," Rachel whispered, "and the adult education classes she is taking. She seems really proud." Indeed, my mother had found unexpected strength in independence. The legal separation had evolved into divorce proceedings, and while the financial settlement was still being negotiated, she had moved into a small apartment and returned to full-time teaching. At an age when many consider retirement, she was rebuilding her life with remarkable resilience. After our guests departed, and Rachel had gone to bed, I sat alone on the back porch reflecting on the journey of the past year. The pain of family betrayal had not disappeared entirely, but its sharp edges had softened with time and distance. What remained was a clear-eyed understanding of how family dynamics can shape us without defining us. The therapy I had initially resisted had proven invaluable, helping me recognize patterns of guilt and obligation that had been programmed into me since childhood. I learned that walking away from toxic relationships was not selfish, but an act of self-preservation. That financial boundaries were not just about money, but about respect and autonomy. Perhaps most importantly, I had discovered that family could be chosen, not just inherited. Rachel and her welcoming parents. Friends who showed up consistently during difficult times. Even my mother and Aunt Susan, with whom I was building new, healthier relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The attempted theft that had once felt like the ultimate betrayal now seemed almost like a gift, a catalyst that forced me to confront family patterns that might otherwise have continued indefinitely. Without that extreme violation of boundaries, I might have spent decades more trapped in cycles of guilt, obligation, and resentment. My phone buzzed with a text message from Carlos, "Great party, man. Your mom is amazing. Hard to believe what she has been through. You too. Proud to know you both." I smiled at the simple affirmation. The difficult decisions I had made, the boundaries I had established, had not only protected me, but had created space for others to grow as well. My mother finding independence. Rachel and I building a relationship based on partnership rather than codependence. Even Mia forced to confront reality without our father's enabling. True family, I had learned, is built on mutual respect and genuine care, not manipulation and obligation. Love that comes with conditions is not really love at all, but a transaction, a means of control disguised as affection. As I prepared to turn in for the night, I thought about the bank call that had exposed my father's attempted theft. What had seemed like the worst day of my life had actually been the beginning of freedom. By attempting to take what was mine, my father had inadvertently given me the push I needed to reclaim my life entirely. Sometimes walking away is not an ending, but a beginning. Sometimes the most painful choices lead to the greatest healing. And sometimes the family we need is not the one we were born into, but the one we build for ourselves, connection by connection, choice by choice, day by day. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic family situation to protect yourself? What boundaries have you set in your own life? Share your experience in the comments below. Remember to like this video. If it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges, and share with someone who might need to hear that it is okay to choose yourself sometimes. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth is not determined by those who fail to see it.